Welcome guys, my name is Tom Antos and this is the shootout of the best 4K cameras of 2017. So I looked all over the internet at the most talked about and also the cameras that were the best selling, and based on that I picked three cameras for this comparison. So first camera is the Panasonic GH5. Also we got the Sony A6500 and the URSA Mini Pro 4.6K. Now this is just one of many videos like this that I'll be doing on my channel, so if you guys have other cameras you'd like me to compare, then just let me know in the comment section below. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to break it down into various categories. I'm going to score each camera in that category, and at the end we'll add up the score and see which camera wins. Alright, so let's start. The first category is build. So Sony A6500, it's a great little camera, weatherproof body, and also because of its size it makes it easy to put on a lot of gimbals. Or if you just need to walk around with it and work with it, let's say for a whole day. Now, sometimes though the body can be too small, especially when you're mounting like big cinema lenses, and then there's just not enough support to take all that weight. Also, the button layout is really awkward. Now, the Panasonic GH5 is also small, sort of like the A6500, but it's just a little bit bigger to be able to take the weight of like a bigger cinema lens. Also, the buttons are fully customizable, so you can really set it up the way that you like working. Now the URSA Mini, and actually the one that I'm using in this test is the URSA Mini 4.6K. The Pro is identical camera, just has more basically buttons on the body itself and a smaller LCD, but the quality of the cameras are the same. And it's a big camera, it's heavy. Also the buttons, they're pretty good on both cameras, but there's not a lot of customization that you can do. So in this category I would give the Sony A6500 1 point because of nice small size. The Panasonic GH5 I would give it 2 points because of small size plus the fully customizable buttons. URSA Mini I would give it 0. LCDs. So on the Panasonic GH5 the LCD is amazing, nice, bright, visible in broad daylight. Also it fully articulates, so you can put it pretty much in any position you want it to. So I would say overall just an amazing LCD that you'd want from any camera. On the URSA Mini Pro, the LCD is also beautiful, nice and bright, very clean. On the URSA Mini 4.6K, it's just a little bit bigger, otherwise it's the same kind of LCD, also fully visible during daylight. Really the only thing I would say on the URSAs is with the LCDs, they're not fully articulated, meaning you can rotate them 90 degrees up and down, but you can't really go 180 degrees like you can go on the Panasonic GH5. Now on the Sony A6500 the LCD is horrible, and I mean like you cannot really work with it and outside especially when you're during broad daylight. And also it doesn't, the LCD doesn't articulate on that camera. It's you can kind of point it up and then a little bit point it down, and that's about it. So you definitely need another LCD or EVF or something if you want to work with that camera outside. So the final score in this category for the Sony would be 0. For the Panasonic GH5 I'll give it 2, and for the URSA Mini Pro of 4.6K I would give it a 1 point. Now how about the menu system? The Sony A6500 is horrible, pretty much like all the Sony cameras. It's just confusing, and it's really difficult to find the settings that really matter to most videographers. When it comes to the Panasonic GH5, the menu system is beautifully laid out, easy, clear to understand, and also you can create your own custom menus that really suit basically each and every individual. The URSA Mini, it's also an amazingly laid out menu, plus you can access pretty much all the settings that you need right from the main screen. So I would say in this category the Sony gets 0, the Panasonic GH5 gets 2, and the URSA Mini Pro also gets 2 points. Now the overall image quality, and that just simply refers to the crispness and the sharpness of the 4K image, and also just the colors. They're all going to be different, they're different cameras with different sensors, but all of these cameras have beautiful just overall image quality, as you can see here by these tests. So really in this category I would give the Sony 2 points, the Panasonic 2 points, and the BlackMagic URSA Mini Pro also 2 points. Now what about the codec, which is the format that the cameras can record in, which is obviously very important, because even if you have an amazing image sensor in a camera but it records it to a horrible format or a horrible codec, then the final image is not going to be as good. So On the Sony A6500, the codec is decent, but it's not definitely not broadcast ready. It's a 420 8-bit image, and that has a lot of limitations, especially when you're going to start color grading the footage a lot. On the Panasonic GH5 though, even though it's a little DSLM point and shoot camera, it's an amazing codec. The codec is actually 422 10-bit, and that means that you can actually push the image quite a bit in post-production. Now when it comes to URSA Mini Pro and 4.6K, those cameras are amazing because yes, they can record in 422 ProRes, or even 444 at 10-bit ProRes, but they can even go into RAW. Not only that, but various types of RAW, compressed and uncompressed. So obviously in this category, the URSA Mini wins, gets 2 points. 1 point to the Panasonic GH5, and the Sony A6500 gets 0 points. Next, let's talk about the dynamic range, which is very important, especially when you're shooting in high contrast scenes, because the bigger dynamic range allows you to capture deeper into the bright areas and into the shadows. So the best camera in this category, as you can see here, according to the test charts that I shot, is the URSA Mini Pro. It can capture the widest dynamic range out of all the cameras. Second place is the Sony A6500, also pretty good range. And the last one in this category is the GH5. Now all of these cameras are still decent when you compare them to just regular consumer cameras, but yes, the URSA Mini by far I would say beats the competition. So 2 points go to the URSA Mini Pro, 1 point to the Sony A6500, and 0 points for the Panasonic GH5. Rolling shutter. Rolling shutter is basically the artifacts you get from CMOS sensors. CMOS sensors don't actually capture the whole image at once. They kind of scan each line separately. And the cameras that don't manage to scan those lines very fast end up with a very kind of exaggerated, kind of a skew effect like this, or like a jello effect. So when it comes to the URSA Mini, the rolling shutter, even though it is still there in extreme situations, it's fairly minimal, or as minimal as probably as you can get on any CMOS camera. Now, when it comes to the Panasonic GH5, it's not as good as the URSA Mini Pro maybe, but it's very close. So I would say they're pretty much on par. The camera that probably performs the worst in this category is the Sony A6500, and that's especially when you're shooting in 4K, as you can see up here. In 4K, the rolling shutter is just horrendous. If you're going to be using the Sony A6500 in HD, it's not as bad, but yes, you want to be definitely aware of the rolling shutter issues that you can have on that camera. So in this category, I would say I'm going to give basically equally the same point to both the URSA and the GH5, 1 point each, and 0 points for the Sony. Now the low light performance of these cameras varies drastically, and that's just simply because of the limitations of each sensor in each camera. The Sony A6500 is pretty spectacular. It's an amazing low light camera. You can shoot in native ISO past 25,000, which is just insane. Most cameras can't even get there. On the Panasonic GH5, I would say you can safely shoot up to 3200. If you're careful, you can even go up to 6400 ISO. It still looks decent. Now on the URSA Mini Pro, really there is not many options. First of all, the cameras can only go up to ISO 1600. And at that, most of the time, the image is going to be pretty unusable, pretty grainy. So I would say on the URSA Mini Pro cameras, you probably want to be shooting in ISO 800. You're going to get the biggest dynamic range, but also you're going to get the cleanest image. So in this category, the 2 points I'm going to give to the Sony A6500, 1 point to the Panasonic GH5, and 0 for the URSA Mini. Next, let's talk about the slow motion, which is how many frames per second each camera can capture. The Sony A6500 can do 120 frames per second in HD, the Panasonic GH5 can do 180 in HD, and the URSA Mini can do also 120 in HD or 2K. The only difference there is that you have to crop in on the image sensor, so it's kind of limiting there. So in this category, I would say the Sony A6500 gets 1 point. The GH5 gets 2 points for the beautiful 180 frames per second slow motion, and the URSA Mini gets 0 points. Now, when it comes to focus assist tools, all of the cameras have focus peaking, and they work, just as you'd expect them to. On the GH5, you can zoom in on the image though also, and you can really then double check to make sure that your image is nice and sharp. because as I've always said, you don't really want to be relying on focus peaking. And the URSA Mini is the same case. You can zoom in on the image beautifully on the LCD quickly, and you can check how your focus is looking. On the A6500 though, that is very limiting, and that's because when you start zooming in on the image to see whether pixel to pixel, whether you're nicely in focus, that's when you're going to start seeing that the image also just tends to get really blurry. So it's not something that I prefer or like to use on the Sony A6500. So I would give 0 points to the A6500 and then 1 point each for the GH5 and the URSA Mini Pro. Now what if you want to rely on autofocus? Well, the URSA Mini Pro has no autofocus, so I'm not even going to talk about that camera. The Panasonic GH5 on the other hand has autofocus, but it's kind of hit and miss. It's not really all there, and I would definitely recommend that you don't rely on that camera's AF system. On the other end though, the Sony A6500 is beautiful. The autofocus is there. Not only that, but it works amazingly in all the different settings that you might be shooting in, and I would say you can safely rely on it most of the time. You still want to probably double check at the end of the day, but in this category I would say definitely 2 points for the Sony A6500 and 0 points for the GH5 and the URSA Mini. Next, let's talk about audio. So the Sony A6500 doesn't really have any pro audio connections. It has a little 3.5mm microphone jack, but it doesn't even have a headphone jack, so you can't really monitor the audio while you're recording it. On the Panasonic GH5, it's kind of similar when it comes to microphone, but at least you get a headphone jack. And there is an optional XLR accessory that you can get, which will actually give you full phantom powered Pro XLR audio connections for your microphones. On the URSA Mini Pro though, you get everything that you need. You get full XLR with phantom power, basically all the Pro things that you need. So I would say in this category, 2 points for the URSA Mini Pro, 1 point for the GH5 and 0 for the Sony A6500. What about when it comes to the video connectors? On the Sony A6500, you get the micro HDMI out, and that's it. And it's a very flimsy connection that you really don't want to be relying on. On the GH5 though, you get the full-size HDMI connector, so it's a lot better. It's because it's just a lot more sturdy kind of connection, so it's not gonna unhook on you unexpectedly. But other than that, also you don't get any Pro connections. On the URSA Mini Pro though, you get all the Pro connections. You get 2 SDI out, you also get SDI in and timecode in case you want to use the camera in kind of a studio environment. So really in this category, I would say 2 points for the URSA, 1 point for the Panasonic GH5 and 0 for the Sony A6500. Next, let's talk about the batteries. So the Sony A6500 has nice and small, light, and also fairly affordable batteries. The only thing is the life on those is not very good. You'll get probably about an hour, maybe you can get a little bit more than that depending on what format you're shooting in. The URSA Mini is kind of the flip side. You get really expensive batteries, and they're also very big and heavy. But if you get those, usually they'll actually last you for pretty much one battery for a whole day. Now the camera that I think is kind of perfect middle ground is the GH5, because that one has affordable batteries, and also the batteries last a nice long time. You'll get between 3.5 hours per battery. So really in this category, I would say 2 points for the Panasonic GH5 and 1 point each for the URSA Mini and for the Sony A6500. Now the last category is the cost of these cameras, and this is something that I think most of us care about. Maybe there's some of you out there who money makes really no difference to you, but to most of us, really at the end of the day, if money was not an issue, we would obviously buy the camera that we think is the best for us. But obviously we have to always budget in kind of what we can afford. So the Sony A6500 you can get right now for around $1,400. The Panasonic GH5 is a little bit more, $2,000. Now the most expensive out of this bunch is the URSA Mini, and it comes in at $5,000 for the 4.6K version and $6,000 for the Pro version. So in this category, I would say 0 points for the URSA Mini, 1 point for the GH5 and 2 points for the Sony A6500. So in the final score, the winner is the Panasonic GH5 with 19 points. Second place is the URSA Mini Pro with 16 points. And coming in last is the Sony a6500 with only 12 points. Now, what do these final scores really mean? Does it mean that the GH5 is the best camera and you should forget about the other ones? No, not really. It just simply means that a GH5 is probably the best all-around camera when you look at all the features. But of course, as we know, not everybody's going to care about all the features. Some people might not care about the LCD because they might have a beautiful monitor they're going to be using with their camera. Somebody else might not care about the autofocus. For example, somebody like me, I almost never rely on autofocus. And then again, somebody else might not care about the low light performance. So really, it just, I would say for you, if you want to decide which camera is best for you, kind of look at the categories that matter to you and disregard the other ones and add up the points that way. Now, if you guys agree with what I've said up here in this video, definitely make sure you smash that like button and share the video if you haven't already subscribed. But if you don't agree with what I've set up here, let me know in the comment section below. Also, let me know maybe what cameras you'd like me to test out and kind of do a comparison of in future videos like these. Anyways, once again, my name is Tom Antos, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!